welcome in to those that just joined us. Good afternoon. We'll get started here. Let me just get everybody into our Zoom here. Hopefully we have audio, hopefully we have video. There we go. Okay, and up on the screen right now, if you just want to look over it briefly, I do want to welcome you to our virtual Healthy Aging and Fall Prevention Summit. Today, Tuesday, we're talking about healthy lifestyles, mind and body. And we will go till our session is 3:30 to 4 today. But I do want to make a note that the next couple of sessions, the times are different. So just looking at this schedule, if there's another session that you want to sit in on, I just recommend looking at the time just so that you don't miss it. But if you do miss the session, they will be posted on our website. So if you do miss a session or you're not able to make a session, but you would still like to watch it, you can always visit our website and we will have those sessions up for you to view. So again, welcome. Thank you, George. So again, welcome to our virtual Healthy Aging and Fall Prevention Summit. I'm glad to have all of you here today, especially our expert who's with us today, Dr. Bob McGrew. He's going to be here with us today discussing healthy lifestyles and the overall body, mind and body. So we are so glad to have him here with us. Dr. Bob is an MD, and he definitely can answer a lot of the questions that you have. So hopefully you've come with questions. So again, I just want to mention that this session is being recorded. If you are uncomfortable, please feel free to turn off your video. And this recording will be posted on our website and social media pages after the recording is done. And again, all participants will be muted for the duration of this session, unless the experts ask for attendees to ask their questions or respond and things like that. So again, this event would not be possible without our wonderful sponsors, especially our presenting sponsors, Kaiser Permanente, Stanislaus County Area Agency on Aging. So we are so grateful for our sponsors here, and we can't forget our Emerald and our Sapphire sponsors as well. You will receive, if you come through our drive-through, which I will talk about here shortly, if you come through our drive-through, you will receive information and resources from these sponsors that will be in the bags. So lots of information and lots of goodies will be in those event bags, which I will get to talking about here shortly. But we are so grateful for our sponsors and the support that they have given us for this Healthy Aging and Fall Prevention Summit. And as I mentioned with our event bags, so we encourage you to come by and pick up your event bag at one of our drive-through distributions. You can see the bags in the top right corner, the teal bags. Those are our event bags for this year. And actually tomorrow, we have our distribution in Grayson, Patterson, and Modesto. So Grayson will be out there from 11:15 to 11:45, Patterson 1:30 to 2 p.m. And then here in Modesto at the Stanislaus Veterans Center, driving through the back of the parking lot, we'll be out there from 2:30 to 4 p.m. tomorrow. So if you live in the Modesto area, you can come on by and get your event bag. And then Thursday, we will be out in Oakdale and Riverbank if you live in that area. And so for today's agenda, I'm going to briefly touch on the resources that were posted to our social media and our website today. So let you know what was talked about today, what was posted on our website, what was posted on our Facebook, and then we will get into talking about some of those topics and opening it up for questions if you have any questions. So what I want to start out with, so today on our Facebook and our website, we talked a lot about eating nutritious food. and making sure that we have a variety in our diet. So a variety of protein, a variety of fruits and vegetables, just like that picture, making sure it's colorful, making sure our plate is colorful, so that we get all those vitamins and nutrients. And then also trying to incorporate whole grains, and if we can, trying to have fiber in our diet, but also keeping an eye on sodium. So the best thing about having a nutritious diet or eating nutritious food, it helps lower our chances of getting cancer, keeping our eyes and our heart healthy, and keeping our bones and our teeth strong. Yesterday we talked about teeth, so making sure that those teeth are strong, keeping our immune system strong, especially with the flu season right around the corner, keeping our memory strong, and just overall feeling good. So that was one of our big topics for today, making sure that we're eating nutritious food. And then also staying active. So how much physical activity is recommended for older adults? So as mentioned today in our topics that were posted, so at least 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity. And that can be broken up over time. So you don't have to do 150 minutes, when you break that up, you don't have to do all your exercise at one time for the day. So you can break that up and do 30 minutes of exercise, or you can do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes after lunch, and maybe 10 minutes in the afternoon, and you get your 30 minutes for the day. And making sure that we find that activity or that exercise that we enjoy, because we're more likely to do the activity or the exercise if it's something that we enjoy. And so benefits of exercise. So not only does exercise, again, lower our risk of cancers and diseases, it does improve our quality of life, reduces our anxiety, risk of depression, and risk of dementia. It improves sleep, and I know Dr. Bob will talk about sleep in a little bit. Maintaining healthy weight, improving our bone health and physical function. Also, it decreases our risk of falling. We're here for the Healthy Aging and Fall Prevention Summit. So exercise does help us decrease our risk of falling, because it helps to improve our muscle loss that we may be experiencing. And it helps to maintain that strength, that balance, that flexibility. So keeping active and finding that type of exercise is good for our body, and lowering our risk of fall-related injuries as well, so we can maintain that independence. And then some simple ways to connect with others. So in our post today, Kaiser Permanente did a great job at helping us to maintain health and having those healthy lifestyles with mind and with body. So some simple ways to connect with others, trying to volunteer. So being active in our community, finding a group that you might enjoy interacting with, or an activity that you might enjoy yourself, maybe volunteering with them, and it might bring you joy. Consider a meetup group. And at first I didn't know what a meetup group was, so I had to look into this. But it's getting in with a group or joining a group that has a common interest of yours. So if that's a reading group, or a hiking group, or a walking group, or maybe a knitting group, some kind of group that you enjoy doing that particular activity, and you might meet some new people. I'm thinking about getting a pet, or maybe you already have a pet. Pets are great companionship. They might also help encourage us to be more physically active, especially if they need to be walked frequently. So pets can also help us lighten our mood, but also keep us active. Shifting from negative thinking. So maybe especially in the past year, you might have been having more maybe down days, or maybe more negative thinking. So shifting that negative thought process to maybe more positive thoughts, and how we can go about our day, and maybe small ways that we can um, brighten our mood a little bit. Consider seeing a counselor or maybe a pastor, somebody that you feel comfortable talking with, especially if you are experiencing maybe depression or other feelings of anxiety, maybe opening up and talking with someone that you trust. And then checking in with friends or neighbors frequently. So especially if maybe it's somebody you don't hear from often, maybe giving them a call on the phone, maybe visiting them, whether that's, being safe and maybe sitting outside and enjoying your company outside, but checking in with people or maybe writing notes just to see how they're doing, especially during these challenging times that we're in right now. So lots of things that we can do to help our overall health and well-being. So at this time, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Bob, our expert. And I know he has lots of things to add about choosing healthy lifestyles. And if you do have any questions, I think I forgot to mention this, please put them in the chat and I can mention them to Dr. Bob and we can answer your questions or comments that you have. So give it to you, Dr. Bob.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. I really thought that you hit on 3 of the 6 things I wanted to mention today in terms of healthy lifestyle choices. And in any age, we have an opportunity to get a little healthier or to stay healthy. As you know, we can't totally stop from getting older, maybe not being as vigorous as we were before, maybe having more achy joints. I'm over 65, so I understand. But what can we do is the question to keep our energy up as good as it could be, to maybe keep our mood up, and so we enjoy life more. So this is really, today we're about enjoying life and staying as active as we can be for the future, whether we're young like Jessica or older like the rest of us, I think, or most of us. Now, okay, so let's talk about the first slide, please, Jessica. And I think we're going to go over sleep, which Jessica mentioned briefly. And this is really interesting because this is newer information. This is something your doctor may not ask about, but we often don't understand about the connection between sleep and memory, sleep and emotions, and sleep and our physical energy. For a lot of us, we judge the time in bed to be the time we were asleep or the time that matters. But what really matters is how much restful sleep did you get, or what we call natural sleep or restful sleep did you get last night? And this could even include naps during the day. So our goal for restful sleep is about 7 hours or more. Now, for many of us, and maybe excluding Jessica, but for people that are over 60, it's very common to get up at night to urinate. And that interrupts sleep, and it's always hard to get back to sleep. Another thing is some people just wake up without having their bladder full or having any other physical symptoms, just kind of wake up at night. So intermittent sleep, either from just waking up or from urinating or other pain issues, is very common as we get older. What really matters is giving us a long enough sleep opportunity during 24 hours. Sleep opportunity is how long are you resting, the TV's off, and you're giving yourself an opportunity to have restful sleep. Now, you may be awake for part of that time, and it actually is okay. One strategy, if you do wake up in the middle of the night and feel like, oh, I'm tossing and turning, I can't go back to sleep, what to do? Well, it turns out that one of the recommendations is to get out of bed and read something or listen to something that's boring. So you may say, what's boring? Well, for me, it's a medical journal. They tend to be a little dry and boring. I can read those and go to sleep quickly. But for you, it might be something else, like the newspaper. But don't watch TV. Turn the TV on is usually a bad idea. And we actually recommend not watching TV right before you go to bed for a few reasons. but a lot of TV shows are activating. They get your adrenaline going, your heart rate going. It's either a shoot 'em up mystery, cops and robbers, or maybe it's the nighttime news, which is designed to hook you into listening to it by making everything sound like the world's going to end tomorrow, right? So that's not good for going to sleep. We're going to sleep. We want an hour or two, preferably 2 hours, where you're winding down, no worries, and feeling very calm. The second thing about going to sleep is you don't want to be around bright lights for the last half an hour to an hour that you go to sleep. If you have a bedtime reading, if you read an old-fashioned book or paper like I often do, right? You don't want a bright bedside light, and you don't want one that's an LED light, because those tend to have blue light, which is actually activates our brains. So a lot of things to think about, but that would give you some ideas on how to achieve a more restful night of sleep. And we often, again, need 8 or 9 hours to get the 7 hours of restful sleep. Or some of us need maybe 8 or 9 hours of sleep. Maybe you have to stay in bed 10 to get 8.5. And that may be your optimum, and that's okay. A nap is okay, preferably in the nap before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, unless you're really going to bed late, because you need an opportunity to kind of build up sleepiness after that nap. And it's good to limit naps to 1 hour, unless you really are sick or really didn't sleep well at all the night before. About an hour, so that you really can get back to sleep at your normal time. And then the recommendation is to wake up at about the same time every morning. That tends to improve your sleep cycle. So what do we get if we improve our sleep? What do we get? Well, it turns out your memory is a lot better. During the first half of sleep, that's the time when we consolidate our memories of what happened today, is when I sleep tonight. So if I don't get good sleep tonight, I'm actually never going to remember as well as I should what happened today. Now, I have a good story about that, which is that my wife, when she refers to things that happened when I was in residency, which was my time of intense training, where we often worked 80 hours a week and went sleepless off and on all week long. We did this for 3 years. We were living near our parents, and we did a number of activities with our family. She'll mention things that happened, and I look at her blankly. I don't remember anything. She said, "Bob, you were there." Well, now she just starts laughing and calls those the residency years because of that lack of memory. Things that I remember that happened, the same family gatherings before or after residency, I remember. So it's just an example of how important sleep is for memory, and how most people in your life want you to remember things, right? So it may not be dementia, it may be sleep. That's the big issue with your current memory problems. Certainly that's something to think about. Now, the other thing with sleep is emotions. We often don't think of sleep as the time when we process our emotions, but sleep tends to be the second half of sleep, which usually happens after 2 or 3 in the morning. So from about 3 to 7, if you sleep between, say, 10:30 and 7, something like that, right? That the second half of sleep tends to be when you really process emotions, and that's often when you have all your dreams. And your dreams are crazy things that often have a little bit to do. They're like comics. They have a little bit to do with what happened the day before, but it just goes in crazy directions, and you are processing a lot of emotions during that time. So without that, you often are more irritable the next day and don't do as well in social situations. Isn't that interesting? And so I've really found that to be true, and prioritize sleep more than I used to now. And then the third thing is just energy. We clearly have more social energy and more physical energy if we get that 7+ hours a night. So that's something to really sleep about. Do we have any questions before we go to the next topic?
At this time, we don't have any questions on
Okay.
sleep, but if you do,
Okay.
you can put them in the chat if anybody
Yeah.
has questions.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, Jessica. Okay, stress. So sleep and stress are two of the six things I have that Jessica did not talk about. So why do I have stress second? Well, of course, worry and stress kills. So when I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about things that make you feel worried, make you feel upset. And that induces what we call a fight or flight reaction. So this gets the adrenaline hormones going, and it makes us feel like we got to do something. That's great if you're out in the woods camping and a bear is chasing you. Not too good if it's your relative, your cousin who you love, or your sister who lives in Maine and is sick and going to the hospital right now. There's not a lot we can do about that, probably beyond pray or put her in our thoughts. So so now we have a lot of chronic stresses in our lives, things we can't resolve right away. So it's very important for our health, our energy, our emotions to identify the causes of stress and to know how we can cope. And this is where mental health comes in. A lot of stress leads to depression, sadness about today, worry about the future. And it turns out we have a lot of help for worry, including counseling. The most effective type of counseling is called cognitive behavioral therapy for chronic worry. And then but that's something you could talk to your personal doctor about if that's an issue for you. But I wanted to bring that up because the stress hormones contribute to, we think, every chronic disease. So we're talking about that they aggravate diabetes levels because they tend to promote inflammation, which can increase your blood sugar, can increase your heart disease. We often associate heart attacks with people who have a lot of stress, don't we? People who are worried all the time. But even cancer, for some reasons having to do with hormonal activation, could be increased in people with chronic stress. So that's something we really need to think about, and hopefully with our, for those of us that are retired watching this, hopefully we can feel like we're doing pretty well with that. All right. Okay, let's go to the next one, Jessica, if no questions.
We do have a question.
Yes.
What do you recommend to relieve stress?
Okay, well, I mean, it depends what kind of stress, but I'll go back to basics. For those who are religious or those who pray, even a lot of people pray who aren't particularly religious, maybe a higher power, maybe it's, of course, Christian faith, but also Jewish and etc. I think prayer is a long-term answer. But for those who don't pray, or maybe you do pray, but that's not adequate, and it often is not adequate to give us reassurance. The other thing that Jessica mentioned is community. So people who feel alone and don't have good friends to talk with and share with tend to have much more stress. So we get rid of stress by chatting and having other people who are interested in feeling like somebody's in it with us. Does that make sense? So as Jessica said, having a group that you connect with, and I know some of our healthy aging groups are like that. There's the Tai Chi group or the other fitness groups, Young at Heart. A lot of people have missed those sessions, probably because they do chat about their health at those times. So fortunately, we're able to offer them in person now. And of course, good friends, neighbors, and calling them up. Does that make sense? That's a big thing. We do have psychologists available, and certainly some of us should take advantage of that. Kaiser has groups for stress. There's also personal counselors available to help you. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bob.
Yeah, diet. So Jessica already really hit on what to do, but a lot of people blame their overweight on genetics. And there is genetics in diet, but for those of us who are my age, we can remember back to the 1950s and 60s, and far fewer people were overweight then than are now. And genetics haven't changed in one or two generations. So what's going on? Well, we're eating a lot of processed food. So I'd be interested, just to ask you to think about. I tell patients eat real food. Another way to talk about that is eat whole food. Whole food. Okay, so what are we talking about? I'll let you think about that. And what I'm talking about is, for instance, fruit juice. Fruit juice is, squeezed and you don't get the pulp. Well, it turns out that the pulp has fiber, and that people who eat the fruit slowly absorb the sugar in fruit, but people who drink fruit juice almost mainline that sugar. And how fast it gets into your system matters in a couple of ways. One is you'll feel fuller longer if you eat the fruit, the whole food, the real food, rather than the juice, and your blood sugar won't go up as much, and your insulin level won't go up as much, both of which are bad. So does that make sense? Whole food, real food. Many of us already do that, and really cut the processed food down. Well, processed food. Well, of course, bread, crackers, spaghetti, and anything that kind of comes packaged on the shelf almost is processed food. And Jessica already mentioned about increased fiber, and that's an example. Whole fruit is an example of that. Whole grain bread is another example, and beans, peas, legumes. Obviously eating a lot of vegetables, which she mentioned, is a good example of really getting the whole food. Okay, so what to drink? Well, again, I would just say get the sugar out of what you drink. So not just fruit juice as an example, but would you believe a Frappuccino at Starbucks has 56 grams of sugar? That's 11 teaspoons of sugar in a Frappuccino. I mean, that's enough to make you diabetic after one day. That's a gigantic amount of sugar. Contrary-wise, a glass of orange juice is about 5 or 6 teaspoons of sugar. It certainly is a lot less than 11, but 2 glasses of orange juice gets you to a Frappuccino and gets you on your way to diabetes. That makes sense? Okay, why don't we go ahead, Jessica?
We do have a question.
Yeah.
What about fasting?
Fasting. Well, there's 2 kinds of fasting. One is kind of a daily fast where you eat, where you try to maintain a half the day or longer where you don't eat. So for instance, some people fast from 8 a.m. at night to 8 a.m. in the morning. So only within a 12-hour window. Some people who want to lose weight particularly will have a narrower window, like don't eat after 8 o'clock in the morning and don't eat till noon. Turns out a lot of people have an easier time getting adjusted to not eating breakfast than not eating other meals, that humans are kind of designed not to be hungry in the morning, it turns out, once you get over that first couple of weeks of cravings. And then the second thing is that the idea that breakfast is the most important meal in the morning is supported mainly by people who make cereal. Seriously, they have huge influence over our FDA and some of the marketing campaigns. So I'm not a big breakfast fan, but if you do eat breakfast, I'd recommend, again, whole food rather than breakfast cereal on average. So like shredded wheat would be a compromise because it's less processed than, say, Captain Crunch or whatever. Okay. Yeah.
There is one more question in the chat. Can we have 1 cup of coffee? I need one at midday.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Coffee, again, coffee with a minimal amount of sugar. Some people have to have some, but you can adjust your taste buds over time to get used to less. Or no sugar, preferably a little cream or creamer. Probably recommend real milk instead of creamer, by the way. We're not impressed that creamer is better for you, maybe worse. Non-dairy creamer is what I'm talking about. And again, the benefit of fasting is it's thought, and there's some proof that that if you go that 12 hours or even longer, 16 hours, which again would be from 8 p.m. at night till midday till 12, which is what I try to do every day. that you're giving your body a chance to use up that extra fat. So if you look down, you see some extra fat you don't like down around your belly, you're actually giving your body a chance to utilize some of that fat for energy. Because you see, when I eat dinner at 7 and I finish eating before 8, it takes my body about 8 hours to use up all the nutrients and all the sugars in that meal, particularly if I'm eating processed foods, it takes even longer. But those last few hours, particularly if I'm not eating in the morning, your body has to start metabolizing a little fat. Does that make sense? It may be fat that you ate yesterday. It may be extra calories, but you tend to do better. On average, people eat a couple hundred less calories a day if they're waiting. And on average, people lose weight. Now, some people actually will skip a whole day of not eating if they're really trying to lose weight, once or twice a week, in addition to doing the prolonged window of not eating. And there's very good weight loss with that kind of program. There's a number of books that kind of explain about what's called intermittent fasting. Okay, so let's go to the next couple real fast. Now we're getting to the end of time. Jessica already talked about exercise. Great job. And again, just to point out, the walking briskly is the most common type of exercise. For minimum half an hour daily, we certainly recommend doing some of the healthy aging exercises for fall prevention. If you've taken that seminar, Young at Heart, doing that kind of training in addition to your basic aerobic exercise. And as you know, if you can't walk, you can do something. The healthy aging, we never let people off the hook with exercise, right? We always can help you find exercises that you can do. Sometimes with some machines, like there's some recumbent exercise machines that you can paddle and so forth, or even with arms. So we just recommend at least a half an hour of movement a day. Certainly house cleaning comes to mind, bike riding if you can do that, tricycle riding, all that kind of stuff. All right, any other questions, Jessica? I think we're almost finished.
Not for exercise.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know we got. Yeah, so this is my last slide, which is on health checkups. This is the fifth slide, or the fifth topic that I had to talk about, and this is about prevention trumps cure. So knowing your numbers kind of knows how you're doing on prevention. So BP is blood pressure, weight. Your doctor maybe talks about body mass index, which is BMI, and that's a way of kind of understanding where you lie compared to other people, because other people are taller than you, other people are shorter than you, all that kind of thing. Men and women are different. And then FBS is fasting blood sugar, and A1C, as many of you know, is a measure of your average blood sugar over 2 months. We use that for diabetes. So other risk factors are obviously smoking is really bad for your arteries. Alcohol is, I didn't mention that alcohol at night impairs sleep greatly. So if you do drink wine, for instance, it's really good to get that done early in the evening. Of course, you don't want to drive afterwards, but drinking wine within 3 or 4, even 4 hours, but particularly 3 hours of bedtime is guaranteed to disrupt your sleep after the first 2 or 3 hours of sleep. It interferes with good sleep. So you've got to cut down the amount. We recommend for our age, so over 65, no more than, I recommend 4 ounces, and recommend at least 3 hours or more drinking it before you go to bed, or the equivalent amount of other alcohol. All right, any more than that, any pushing it back towards bedtime is a really bad American habit that greatly interferes with your health. And then obviously, if you need screening, if you're on medications for diabetes and for heart problems, heart of the artery problems, you've had a stroke, a lot of people don't follow up with their checkups and don't take the medicines regularly. And study after study shows that people who take things regularly and follow up more have better outcomes. They live longer, feel better, and are less likely to have recurrent strokes or heart attacks. So, and the health screening, obviously, is for colon cancer, of course, mammograms, and et cetera. Vaccinations right now, our hospitals in America still have lots of COVID patients, and they're almost all unvaccinated. So does the vaccine work? Absolutely. The hospitals are testifying to it at this moment. The deaths are overwhelmingly people who are unvaccinated, some of whom are older like us, and we're the highest risk to die. So certainly a good example of the power of vaccinations. Flu shots do work. Actually, COVID shots work better in terms of how many hospitalizations and infections they prevent. But flu shots keep people out of the hospital relative to no flu shot, and more people survive even if they get a symptomatic flu if they've had the shot, as well as reducing the number of people who get a bad flu. So we do recommend influenza. I'm getting, by the way, the best time to get influenza vaccine is right now, second half of October. So I'm gonna get mine soon. Hopefully you'll get that soon. All right, and then the last thing was community. And community, Jessica mentioned social gatherings. And again, a lot of our healthy aging groups are very social. But that's the sixth thing for health, that it's studied again and again, that people who feel tied in to relatives and friends and organizations tend to live longer. And one of the studies is on people who go to church, both Christian church and other congregations. There are multiple studies showing that they tend to live on average 3 to 5 years more than age-matched controls who do everything the same except don't go to church once a week, just one meeting a week. So I mean, and we think that probably the same thing applies to people, to other organizations that have the same amount of community. That makes sense, a tight community. Okay, that's it. I appreciate everybody watching, and we'll have another good program tomorrow. Any other questions?
We do have a question, Dr. Bob. So there is some talk in the chat about COVID vaccines. So we had some questions about the booster, and currently there is no Moderna booster at this time. But the question is, can you mix the shot? So I'm guessing if they have Moderna, they should, I'm gonna let you take this question, but should not take the Pfizer booster.
Right, and I saw somebody posted that they're planning to get their COVID shot tomorrow. Wonderful. Because I should say first about COVID. I'm happy to talk about it for as long as anybody wants to, by the way. But I should say that we think that, the present surge in COVID is definitely going down. It peaked in late September, as you know. It's going down. In this county, we have about half as many people who are in the hospital now, about half as many positive infections as we did then. But it's still a pretty high rate. We're still running 150 to 170 people in the hospital this week. And we peaked at about 300. Which was about the same peak as we had last January with the last surge. So point being, we still have a lot of COVID. It hasn't gone all the way, and we expect it to go down for a while, but stay at a steady rate. And a number of us who've been vaccinated still could get COVID, although hopefully not in the hospital or die, but we can still get symptomatic disease. And those of us who are particularly vulnerable, like my wife, who's on a medication that reduces her immune system for her chronic disease. She has rheumatoid arthritis. She could wind up in the hospital. And one of our friends' daughters just died, who was on one of those immune suppressant diseases. She was 44. So COVID's still around. In terms of the vaccines, the present guidance from the CDC is, and from the FDA, is to get the vaccine that you got before. But they are now considering mixing and matching. And the biggest mix and match, the most evidence is if you got the J&J vaccine. That was the one-shot vaccine in March. If you got that, pretty much every expert agrees that you should get a second J&J shot. And that if you get the second shot, even this late, your protection from hospitalization goes from somewhere around 50% to 90%, which is really good. 91%. That's as good as after Moderna or Pfizer. So, so really recommend that if you got J&J. If you got Moderna or Pfizer, we recommend getting the same one, if at all possible. And if you got J&J and you said, well, I just read that getting Moderna or Pfizer after the J&J Johnson & Johnson shot, hopefully I'm not leaving everybody in the dust, but some people might have read that maybe that works better to get the Moderna or Pfizer after you got the J&J. I've read the same thing. And in fact, I've read some of the papers saying that, some of the original research saying that. It looks like it's probably true, but the FDA has not approved that yet. So many of your providers won't do it, like the pharmacies, because it's not official guidance yet. Does that make sense? But they're considering that right now. And that's for the J&J. Now, you may say, well, what about if we've already had Moderna, can I get the J&J? Or if I've already had Pfizer, can I get the Moderna? And the answer to that is we don't have good evidence. If you had boosters to Moderna, well, let's put it this way. If you've had 2 Moderna already or 2 Pfizer already, there's no good evidence that mixing the other one, so I had Moderna, now I want Pfizer, I had Moderna, now I want J&J. There's no good evidence that mixing and matching any of the other ones works better. So what I'm trying to say is if you had the J&J, the FDA is actively considering whether they should recommend getting the Moderna or the Pfizer. Okay, we've got that. But if I had, but right now, the only thing recommended is to get your second J&J. And that's been shown with multiple studies to work very well. So we actually recommend everybody run out and do that now. If you got the J&J more than 2 months ago, get the Johnson & Johnson, also called Janssen vaccine, by the way, get that second dose. Again, if you had Pfizer 2 doses, Moderna 2 doses, or Pfizer 3 doses, Moderna 3 doses, we have no good evidence that adding the J&J or any other one, although those 3 are the only ones, Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J are the only ones licensed in the US. You have to go to Europe to get the other 2. We don't have any evidence that adding the J&J again, after you've had 2 or 3 Pfizer, Moderna, that adds anything. Does that make sense? So hopefully I haven't confused everybody. I know if you haven't been following this, it doesn't really make sense, but I know several of you probably have been following this very, very carefully and know what I'm talking about. Okay. Any other questions?
So at this time, we do have one more, but let me just share the resources and tomorrow's session
yes,
for those that need to hop off.
Absolutely.
So here are some resources available here in Stanislaus County that can help us with our overall health and well-being and living those healthy lifestyles. Again, this will be recorded, so if you're not able to write down these resources at this time, again, we will be recording this session so you can watch it again to make sure that you get these resources and information. And as Dr. Bob mentioned, we will be back here on Zoom tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and we'll be talking about fall prevention. So if you would like to join us for our fall prevention session, that will be tomorrow at 9 a.m. and you can use the same Zoom link and information that you did today. So thank you for joining us today. If you need to hop off, Dr. Bob, there is one more question.
Yeah, I'll answer one or more questions. If you have a few minutes, Jessica, I'm fine.
Yes. So the last question, is it not safe to travel or airplane traveling? Is it safe to travel?
Well, that's a great question. And my wife and I canceled 2 trips in September. and are considering not going on other trips we planned. And so this is very hard. As I mentioned, my wife is particularly vulnerable. And so when I actually did travel for a important family gathering, went on the airport, I was actually, this was just 3 weeks ago, I was actually double masking in the airport and on the plane, because many people were not wearing an adequate mask, even though they were required to wear in the terminal and on the plane. The mask was down, was not covering their nose, it wasn't tight, and a lot of people just had it off for much of the time, talking and eating and so forth. So, and they were just right around me. So there's very good evidence that you can, despite the modern airplanes filtration systems of air, that you can get COVID from, particularly if people have their mask down or they're not doing it effectively. So I actually wore a surgical mask with a N95 mask over, and managed not to get COVID. But that was, they're pretty uncomfortable to wear that for 6 or 8 hours. But yes. So the point is, you have to choose your risk. And I was very careful, although I probably would be okay if I got COVID. I've had 3 immunizations so far. And by the way, I think the last, in terms of boosters, I just failed to mention that I think everybody knows, though, that the 3rd booster was approved for everyone over 65. So we don't have to be immunosuppressed to get that 3rd Pfizer booster or the 3rd shot of Moderna, which is called the booster shot. We should all be getting that now to be protected. As I mentioned, the big issue with travel is that we're anticipating a moderate level of the Delta variant, which is very catchy, to be with us, maybe another wave in January after Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. And the big reason why we're anticipating that is there just aren't enough vaccinated Americans. It's very sad from my viewpoint. As I said, we're just helping our friends with a memorial for their 44-year-old daughter who was vaccinated but had this immune system problem. She couldn't make adequate antibodies. And when she got COVID recently from unimmunized children, because they were too young to be immunized, she died. Now, she did get it from children, young children, but we know that unimmunized older kids, 12 and above, who could have immunization, and people who are adults who haven't been immunized, that's a large reservoir of COVID. And that puts the rest of us at risk primarily. So, so you just have to take that into account. The last thing is that car travel is probably safer in terms of COVID right now for those of you who are considering. If you can drive to Los Angeles, probably better than going to the airport and flying. But it's hard to get to the East Coast driving. Any other questions?
It looks like, what is the difference between COVID versus the Delta? So you had mentioned Delta variant, so maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry. So someone, if you're still here, most people I think understand that there's actually different types of COVID. So it's still COVID, but the genes, which we all have genes, all viruses have genes, the genes mutate. And as they mutate, the COVID virus changes shape. So the original COVID virus in America, if my hand is a receptor on our cells that the COVID can dock into and infect the cell, the original COVID was kind of like my fist. See how my fist is bunched up? And when it goes into my receptor, it doesn't go all the way down. I don't know if you can see that, but I've got a space there. It's not all the way down. Well, what happened with the COVID virus is a new, more catchy strain happened called Delta. It came from India and hit the US in March. And by June, it was really bad. And the Delta, the docking, what we call the binding site of the Delta virus on the spike protein, it's like this. It's straighter. So guess what? Boom, boom. goes all the way down. Instead of going in partly, it goes all the way down. And there really is a physical confirmation of a cleft and a receptor that it goes in. That's really how it looks. So boom, it goes in means it's much more catchy. It's twice as catchy. An average person with COVID, Delta COVID, will infect 6 to 8 other persons. With the original variant, which we call the original strain, it was 2 to 3 other persons. So much more catchy. And when it gets in your system, it has a way of infecting cells in your body quite a bit faster. So people tend to get sicker faster with Delta, more hospitalizations, more deaths per age group. And right now we're seeing a lot, because the most immunized group of people in America is people over 65. Not only are hospitals full of unimmunized Americans with Delta variant, but they're also younger. They're 35, 45, and 55-year-old people rather than mostly 70 and 80-year-old people. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
And if you're, the last thing is if you're over 75, you're more vulnerable. So in terms of travel, it's particularly 80, 90, even with vaccinations, your immune system may not have made enough antibodies. So you do have to kind of put your age into the variability. Okay, I'm sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm glad that people could get their questions answered, and I'm glad that you were able to join us here, Dr. Bob, and spread your expertise with us today.
Okay, nice to see everyone.
We will see you all tomorrow at 9 a.m.